This is just a visual cue of portion distortion. So what you get and what's actually a serving. I have issues with what they consider a serving because it may be 685 calories, but that's 33 grams of fat, and that's way more than a serving. But not to split hairs at this point. But you can see the difference. We're served 2 to 3 times the amount of calories of what we're actually supposed to be ingesting. 1,345 calories is about what some people should be ingesting in an entire day, depending on their age, their activity level, their height, stuff like that. So, but you can see how messed up that is. There are different ways to portion size. You can do calorie counting, hand measuring, point systems, calorie restriction. It really depends on what's easiest for you. I have my own method that I will show you that I think makes it easier, but again, I've considered all of these things into that, but again, it depends on what works for you. I want you to return if you don't, to relying on internal versus external cues. If you go on vacation, maybe you don't have your phone. Maybe you go to a place that doesn't have a phone signal. How are you going to track that on an app if you have calorie counting? Or if you're like a client of mine who writes in their food in a food diary, how are you going to do that if you have no signal? So my job is to try and get people to start knowing when they're hungry again, listen to internal cues of when they're full, and understand what a portion is for themselves. A lot of people complain that they're hungry when they switch to a plant-based lifestyle. You have to eat more. It sounds so counterintuitive, but I like food. I have a big appetite. If I want the stretch receptors in my stomach to actually be full, I have to eat a lot of food. I make sure that's vegetables because they're like 50 calories per cup. So I'm getting bang for buck. And then I'm not hungry and I'm full until the next meal because I've had enough food and there's enough fiber in it. And I've made sure that there's enough protein and enough fats to actually keep my body satisfied until the next meal. Yeah, it takes a little time to figure that out. It does. But you're worth it. The first thing that you need to understand is how big your stomach is, because you can't go by calorie counting apps and tracking systems and all that, because most of them are kind of inaccurate because there's a whole lot of information that they're not taking into consideration. Again, if you want me to do these calculations with you, I would be more than happy to give you the actual calculations and how I got to those calculations so that you can do that yourself, because my job is to educate you so that you can do this without me. But the first step is how big is your stomach? Your hand. So make a fist. This is the size of your stomach. And if you put that right next to your chest, or right where your stomach is, that's how big it is. You want to eat to about 80% full of that. That way your stomach has time, has the ability to churn. Because when you fill it too full, like you have your fist here and you fill it up to here, well, it can't. That's why you get kind of that feeling after you ate too much because your stomach is trying to churn and it's like can't, like a little got a cog stuck in the wheel. Second, eat like a cat. And what I mean by that is don't eat what cats eat. Dear God, don't eat what cats eat. They know what they want to eat. A lot of times they'll snub food, right? If you've had a cat, they've walked away from it enough times because they know that there's a nutrient in there they don't want or they don't need. They're looking for something else. And that's sometimes that's what we're doing a lot of times. That's why a lot of times you go somewhere and you eat and you're like, why am I still hungry, for God's sake? Because your body's looking for some other nutrients. And there are other reasons too, but that is one reason. So you have two sensors, you have more than that, but two hormones in your body that regulate hungry and full. So you do have a stretch receptor that hits your spine when your stomach gets full enough. It hits that spinal cord, sends a signal up to your brain, albeit a very slow signal. It does send a signal, and it tells your brain, sends some leptin and says, hey, we're full down here. We're good. We're good. Shut off the hunger cues. And that's what happens. There's also another one that's a nutrient sensor that knows that, oh, yeah, okay, we got enough. Yep, we got enough vitamin C out of that to do what we need to do. Again, I'm just putting food in the system and letting it figure out what antioxidants it needs for whatever's going on in there because it's creating free radicals. It's doing what it's got to do. I put the food in. It tells me, oh, yeah, that's what we needed. Okay, cool. We can move on. Those receptors make calorie counting useless because if you're going by calorie counting and not following some of the intuition, because again, we kind of have to get there because intuition is not always the best thing. 100 calories of Oreos will not fill you up. It's going to taste pretty damn good. Not going to lie about that, especially if you dunk it in some almond milk. Yummy. But it's not going to fill you up because it hasn't hit that stretch receptor. It's probably going to be like 1 or 2 Oreos if you're lucky. And 100 calories of mushrooms, well, that's going to be a whole lot of bulk, but it's like 1 or 2 nutrients. It's got some vitamin D and some fiber and a couple of other things. It's not going to be enough. It's got to be both. That's why we eat a big plate of yummy food. Optimal health formula is what I created back in 2018 called the LG plate. This is what it's comprised of. I'm not going to read this because you're intelligent women and you can absolutely read this on your own. And I'll show you a diagram because sometimes words don't mean anything. So a diagram does help. But that's what you would eat per day. And the beautiful part is that all of that food that you see on that screen is about 1,732 calories per day if you're eating that. Now, not everybody can eat 1,732 calories. I can't. If I eat 1,732 calories every day, I will gain weight. I'm allowed to eat about 1,300 based on my size. So I cut that formula down a little bit. I know how much exactly of things I eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I know I can eat this many carbs for dinner. I can eat this much protein for breakfast, this much protein for lunch, this much for dinner. So I've broken it down for myself. I always suggest that people do the same, and I can help you do that too. But this is what it looks like in, hey, fruit frozen time. This is what it looks like in a diagram. So this is what the portions look like. So if you have a round plate or when you have a square plate, if you just superimpose in your mind this round thing in front of it, you'll have greens and non-starchy vegetables will be the bulk of your plate. So almost 3/4 of it is going to be vegetables. So it doesn't matter if it's spinach or a salad, just non-starchy veggies. Then you're going to have some whole grains and starches because they are important, just 10% of them. You're going to have some legumes or soy. If you eat meat, then that would be the 10% there. You'll have fruits and you'll have fats. So again, you'll see that there's all of the macros in there. I don't exclude food groups. I don't exclude any of those macronutrients. Per plate, what that would break down to, just to make it easier. Again, I'm giving different formulas depending on how your brain works and sees things. So a different way to look at it is that it's a 1/2 cup of grain or starch per meal, 2 cups of greens or non-starchy veggies, a 1/2 cup of beans or soy, and a 1/4 cup or a medium piece of fruit, and an 1/8 of a cup of whole fat. So like nuts. That's what it looks like in hot action. Because again, it looks much nicer when it's actually food and not just like this little diagram for you. I will send you tomorrow this in a larger a larger picture. Obviously, I couldn't get it that small, but just so you can see how much you should have for weight loss, or if you're at maintenance levels, you can see like samples of the food and then or examples of the food and then the meals. Like I show you a couple of meals that I've made that actually kind of exemplify that a little bit. Again, so you can see it in action, so it makes it a little easier for you to apply it.